Barenziah, Book 2, by Anonymous. Barenziah and Straw settled into Riften for the winter, taking a cheap room in a slummier section of town. Barenziah wanted to join the Thieves Guild, knowing there would be trouble if she were caught freelancing. One day in a barroom, she caught the eye of a known member of the guild, a bold young Khajiit named Theris. She offered to bet him if he would sponsor her membership. He looked her over, grinning, and agreed, but said she'd still have to pass an initiation. What sort of initiation? Ah, Theris said. Pay up first, sweetness. This passage has been censored by order of the temple. Straw was going to kill her, and maybe Theris too. What in Tamriel had possessed her to do such a thing? She cast an apprehensive look around the room, but the other patrons had lost interest and gone back to their own business. She did not recognize any of them. This wasn't the inn where she and Straw were staying. With luck, it'll be a while or never before Straw found out. Theris was by far the most exciting and attractive man she had yet met. He not only told her about the skills she needed to become a guild member of the Thieves Guild, but also trained her in them himself, or else introduced her to people who could. Among these was a woman who knew something about magic. Katisha was a plump and matronly Nord. She was married to a smith, had 2 teenage children, and was perfectly ordinary and respectable, except that she was very fond of cats. In biological inference, their humanoid counterparts, the Khajiit. She also had a talent for certain kinds of magic, and she cultivated rather odd friends. She taught Barenziah an invisibility spell and schooled her in other forms of stealth and disguise. Katisha mingled magical and non-magical talents freely, using one set to enhance the other. She was not a member of the Thieves Guild, but was fond of Theris in a motherly sort of way. Barenziah warned to her as she never had toward any woman, and over the next few weeks she told Katisha all about herself. She brought Straw there too sometimes. Straw approved of Katisha, but not of Theris. Theris found Straw interesting and suggested Barenziah that they arrange what he called a threesome. Absolutely not, Barenziah said firmly, grateful that Theris had broached the subject in private for once. He would not like that. I would not like that. Theris smiled his charming triangular feline smile and sprawled lazily on his chair, stretching his limbs and curling his tail. You might be surprised, both of you. Pairing is boring. Barenziah answered him with a glare. Or maybe you wouldn't like it with that country bumpkin of yours, sweetness. Would you mind if I brought along another friend? Yes, I would. If you're bored with me, you and your friend can find someone else. She was a member of the Thieves Guild now. She had passed their initiation. She found Theris useful but not essential. Maybe she was a bit bored with him too. She talked to Katisha about her problems with men, or what she thought of as her problems with men. Katisha shook her head and told her she was looking for love, not sex, that she'd know the right man when she found him, that neither Straw nor Theris was the right one for her. Barenziah cocked her head to one side quizzically. They say dark elven women are pro something. Prostitutes? She said, although she was dubious. You mean promiscuous? Although some do become prostitutes, I suppose, Katisha said as an afterthought. Elves are promiscuous when they're young, but you'll outgrow it. Perhaps you're beginning to already, she added hopefully. She liked Barenziah, had grown to be quite fond of her. You ought to meet some nice elven boys, though. If you go on keeping company with Khajiits and humans and what have you, you'll find yourself pregnant in next to no time. Barenziah smiled involuntarily at that thought. I'd like that, I think, but it would be inconvenient, wouldn't it? Babies are a lot of trouble, and I don't even have my own house yet. How old are you, Barry? 17? Well, you've a year or two yet before you're fertile, unless you're very unlucky. Elves don't have children readily with other elves after that. Even so, you'll all be all right if you stick with them. Barenziah remembered something else. Straw wants to buy a farm and marry me. Is that what you want? No, not yet. Maybe someday. Yes, someday, but not if I can't be queen. And not just any queen, the queen of Mournhold. She said this determinedly, almost stubbornly, as if to drown out any doubt. Katisha chose to ignore this last comment. She was amused at the girl's hyperactive imagination, took it as a sign of a well functioning mind. I think Straw will be a very old man before someday comes, Berry. Elves live for a very long time. Katisha's face briefly wore the envious, wistful look humans got when contemplating the 1,000-year lifespan elves had been granted by the gods. True, few ever actually lived that long as disease and violence took their retrospective tolls, but they could, and one or two of them actually did. I like old men too, Barry said. Katisha laughed. Barenziah fidgeted impatiently while Theris sorted through the papers on the desk. He was being meticulous and methodical, carefully replacing everything just as he'd found it. They'd broken into a nobleman's household, leaving Straw to hover outside as a lookout. Theris had said it was a simple job, but very hush hush. He hadn't even wanted to bring any other guild members along. He said he knew he could trust Berry and Straw, but no one else. Tell me what you're looking for, and I'll find it, Berry whispered urgently. Theris's night sight wasn't as good as hers, and he didn't want her to magic up even a small orb of light. She had never been in such a luxurious place, not even a Darkmoor castle of Count Sven and Lady Inga where she had spent her childhood compared to it. She'd gazed around in wonder as they made their way through the ornately decorated and hugely echoing downstairs rooms, but Theris didn't seem interested in anything but the desk and the small, book-lined study on the upper floor. St! He hissed angrily. Someone's coming, Berry said a moment before the door opened and two dark figures stepped into the room. Theris gave her a violent shove toward them and sprang to the window. Barenziah's muscles went rigid. She couldn't move or even speak. She watched helplessly as one of the figures, the smaller one, leaped after Theris. There were two quick, silent stabs of blue light, then Theris folded over into a still heap. Outside the study, the house had come alive with hastening footsteps and voices calling out in alarm, and the clink of armor hurriedly put on. The bigger man, a dark elf by the looks of him, half lifted, half dragged Theris to the door and thrust him into the waiting arms of another elf. A jerk of the first elf's head sent his smaller, blue-robed companion after him. Then he sauntered over to inspect Barenziah, who was once again able to move, although her head throbbed maddeningly when she tried to.